Hi everyone, thanks for this episode of New Geegan Times. On this episode, we have an incredible and charming guest. We have an Instagram model and host of the Taxis podcast, Elizabeth. Duffy is an Instagram model and OF creator. She's a pro body positivity, creative arts, and exploring the depths of culture and societal norms. On her podcast, Tax This, Elizabeth speaks with guests about all things freedom, money, mindset, spirituality, and motivation. Welcome to the charming Elizabeth, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You're really welcome. All right, let's jump into it. Tell me about, take us back. Tell me about your life growing up, and your family, and I guess the journey you've got to this point.
Oh man, okay, so we're doing like a full therapy session. I
Yeah.
was born on a cold winter's night. So I grew up in like what's called the Rust Belt, right? So like this kind of very like impoverished area that runs along the Great Lakes region. And in so a small, super small town in Western New York. And I got to see firsthand kind of like how government policies impact poor communities, right? So that's kind of how I grew up, like on the government cheese and all that. And so I became like really passionate about just, kind of showing people how they're kind of voting against their own best interests and how like lessening that kind of top down authoritarian government actually implements more freedom, more opportunities for people in low income communities and stuff like that. So when I was like, I don't know, maybe 22, 23, something, somewhere around there, I started making like freedom based, liberty based content like that and just, mixing it up with my humor or whatever that I garnered through, growing up the poor, smelly, stinky kid that had to
Mhm.
like, get a little bit of a sense of humor for people to want to be around her. So I started mixing that all up on TikTok is where I started originally back when like TikTok had just switched from Musically, so like an OG. Except I got my original account deleted. Surprise, surprise. But I'm back on a new one. So yeah, I just started like running with it and it's really grown from there. And then I started up my podcast not that long ago, actually. I'm kind of newer to podcasting and I found that it's like a totally different beast. It's like a totally different skill set for sure, because I'm used to just making these little 7-second, 15-second videos. And then you try to do long form and like you really like, I don't know, kudos to you guys. Like it seems like you've been doing yours for longer. Because it is a total skill set. It's very cool to learn though.
Yeah, definitely. Tell me about the. I guess elaborate. Tell me about the Taxis podcast and what it represents.
Yeah, so basically the whole idea was like doing what I do now with these kind of like snarky anti-government posts, right? But doing the long form version. And so I've had like different libertarians on, but I've also had mindset people on and stuff like that because the whole focus really is just like how do we help people who come from these communities? How do I like help people all around the whole thing, like mindset stuff, what's best voting wise and what would actually lead to more opportunities. And then also like kind of showing people who do think that they're helping, right? Because you have a lot of people who vote based on empathy for more like top down government authoritarianism, thinking that they're helping poor communities. And so I'm pretty like into showing that specifically how like no you're actually harming these poor communities by what you're voting for. I mean you think you're helping and I totally get it and you're trying to be empathetic but you're actually like doing the exact opposite. So yeah, I'm just trying to like explain all of that and make it somewhat funny and entertaining or something like that.
Yeah, cool. In your opinion, how would you describe where America's position um, moving forward into the future? Um, I guess not getting too political here, but generally speaking, where do you see the US position?
Like how so?
Um, do you think it's in a good place or do you think it's a bad place? And I guess politically too, where do you see it going in the future?
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, I think it's definitely gotten to a pretty rough place, right? Definitely have a lot of issues, but overall, I'm like really white pilled about it. Overall, I'm very optimistic and see things going in like a positive fashion because with all of the craziness and everything, it's really like shaken people up, right? So there was a ton of people who didn't even know how our financial system worked, right? They didn't know anything about like just like how our currency functions or anything. Like you literally had some people that thought that we are still on the gold standard. Right? Like, no, our money's like worth something. And it's like, well, they had no idea what fractional reserve banking was or any of it. So, but with all of the kind of insanity that's happened, people have started to have to pay attention to that. Also, kind of that one specifically, crypto really woke a lot of people up with that, right? Like got them interested in money. Like why is crypto different than what we have going on? What is sound money? Stuff like that. So that's really cool and positive. Also, I think just I mean, the internet for all of its problems also brings so many awesome solutions, you know? Like when it comes to decentralization, you can now go online and like do anything you want to do. So the job opportunities are endless, which is amazing. The creativity is endless, which is amazing. And not only that, but the resources, right? So like you now have access to all of the top doctors that are creating content online instead of just your local physician in your small town, right? So I don't know. I look at that kind of stuff and I'm like, how can it not keep getting better, right? Like we're just implementing more and more positive stuff, and of course, it always comes along with some negative shit. Like that's unavoidable, but I think overall, it's more positive than it's negative, and we're moving in like a more positive direction.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for sharing the insights. All right. Tell me about why you actually believe big government actually harms poor people.
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of examples of this. Like you can go down a whole laundry list. I'll kind of share a few of them, right? So when you start to get into like handouts and welfare programs and things like that, we have over 80 different welfare programs that we spend federal money on, which is a lot. We spend a lot of money on these. And the, while the intent is good, a lot of the outcome is really bad. So one example of that is like dependency traps, right? So a dependency trap is say a single mother is like she's making I'm just going to pull out some random numbers or whatever $30,000 a year, right? And she qualifies for all of these welfare benefits. So she qualifies for free healthcare and subsidized housing and free childcare and food stamps and blah blah blah. That's going to raise her up to a standard of living that's like let's say $60,000 a year, right? So she's now accustomed to that $60,000 a year and she's living her life like that. Well, if she gets a small raise at her job or a small promotion, she tries to better her life that way. Um, just a small promotion can bump her completely out of qualifying for all of those, right? So she can go from $30,000 a year to making 32, and now she doesn't qualify for any of those other things. And now she went from living a $60,000 lifestyle all the way down to $32,000 lifestyle because she doesn't qualify for the benefits anymore. So in her perspective, it's a very dumb decision to try to earn more money. It's a very dumb decision to like better her skills or anything like that. It kind of creates this incentive to stay stagnant, this incentive to stay on the programs, and that's what they call a dependency trap, right? And then there with that, there's also asset tests that come along too. So say she wants to start like squirreling away money on the side and increasing her savings account. Well, as soon as she hits a certain amount in her savings account, she doesn't qualify for those additional benefits anymore. So all of a sudden, like she's now disincentivized from savings as well. So she's kind of just completely disincentivized from trying to do more and trying to like better herself or up her life or anything like that because it's going to be a poor financial decision for her. So it creates this kind of dependency.
And what do you think the solution is?
Yeah, so definitely like I would say like if I was a government, I that would be kind of the opposite of what I would do. Like you want to incentivize productivity, you want to incentivize creativity. So having it set up like that is kind of crazy, but we also have this issue where so Americans are very generous, right? Like people like to say, "Oh, if you didn't force people to pay taxes, nobody would pay for anything." And I always use the example like if there's some GoFundMe for like a hamster that needs a wheelchair, people will pay it. Like that hamster is going to get a wheelchair, right? Like Americans chip in for anything and everything and kind of always have. So this whole like idea that we wouldn't chip in is crazy. But what the government has done is created a monopoly on the poverty, right? So, like, even to feed homeless people in like the majority of cities across America, you have to go to the government and get a permit for it. Otherwise, it's illegal. So, it's illegal for you, even as an organization, as a church, anything to feed homeless people, which is absolutely wild. So, they create this whole situation where they have a monopoly on helping the poor, or you have to go get a license for it to make sure like the government says it's okay. And so I would say like getting rid of those things, getting rid of those restrictions, allowing people to help out like on a community wide basis and stuff like that, instead of the government monopolizing it and being like, no, 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 only we can do that, or you have to come get a permit from us. Like stuff like that would be a big one. And then you get into some of the other topics, right? Like how gun control harms people in poor communities, especially poor rural communities, where the wait time for like a police officer to show up is very, very long. I think it's like 3 to 6 minutes across America normally, but you get into rural areas and it can be 20 minutes plus. I know like firsthand that one because I grew up in such a small town that we didn't have a police department. So all you had was like state troopers that would kind of be around the area ish. So if you had to call the police, like you're waiting on a state trooper to get there, right? So all of these things can negatively impact poor people, and they don't get really looked at from that perspective as much. You know, you think you're helping, but a lot of times it ends up being a negative impact.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's great insights. Um, Tell me about scarcity mindset, and what that means, and yeah, I guess elaborate on that more.
Yeah. So scarcity mindset is basically this whole idea that there's not enough to go around, or you being like stuck in the negative loop, right? Of just like everybody's out to get me, or I can't do anything better with my life because it's just everybody else has everything happen good for them, but like I have the worst luck, or blah blah blah. And this is super prevalent in like poor communities, obviously, like it's what I grew up around. It's a lot of like culture based stuff, and then it's also really prevalent in like people who are like pro communism and stuff, this whole like idea that eat the rich, right? Like that whole movement. um, so it's basically the kind of this idea of like, well, if I can't, like, nothing good's gonna happen to me, or the world's against me, or the majority of things are negative. It's very black pilled. And so the issue with that is you almost create a victim mentality for yourself, and then everything you become a victim in a ton of different situations, and it's like nobody else can pull you out of that except you. So it's this really tough thing trying to help people with that, because you have to be like ready to come out of it yourself, right? You have to be ready to be like, I don't want to look at things that way anymore, and you have to embrace the personal responsibility that comes with getting out of it. And that's the hardest part, right? Because like who wants responsibility when you can just like blame external factors constantly? So yeah, that's the definition of scarcity mindset, I think. But I don't remember if you asked the second part of the question. Sorry.
Yeah. So tell me about. All right, even better. Tell me about the abundance opposite. And I'm assuming, well, definitely, you obviously got abundance mindset yourself. How did you actually get that? Like, how did you? Obviously, you've come from, obviously, as you said, like a poorer background in a small kind of area. How, you've done incredible. Should be how did you get that mindset?
Yeah, so it was a lot of work. That's where like that is a toughie, because I used to be like a complete 180 from where I'm at now. I used to be like the person who hated all things like personal development, or like anybody like coming at you with like a positive mindset. I'd be like, "Oh, fuck off. Like fuck you," like I didn't want anything to do with it. And honestly, what did it for me? I was like 19 or 20, and I was watching the news, like the business channel, and I realized I didn't understand any of the numbers at the bottom of the screen or the arrows pointing anywhere, and I was like, I need to learn the stock market. Like that was like my dumb blonde moment of I need to learn the stock market. And so I just started googling stuff, right? I just started trying to teach myself basic economics, because they don't teach you this in your government funded public schools, which is insane. But so I just started trying to teach myself that, and I I've always wanted more, right? So, but my mindset lagged behind. That was what was kind of holding me back for a lot of it. It wasn't like, it was not for like lack of work. I always had like 2 jobs while I went to high school, stuff like that. It wasn't for that. It was my mindset that was holding me back. I just didn't know it. So I start getting into like trying to teach myself the stock market, and it leads to starting to read books like Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert how do you say his last name? Kiyosaki.
Yes.
And yeah, and Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, like your super basic like finance bro books. Right. And so I start reading them, and a lot of the stuff in there is like mindset based. And so I wasn't happy about it at the time, but I was like, I guess I have to work on my mindset. Like all of these people in these books are saying that a huge difference between like abundance mentality and scarcity mentality is straight up just your own mindset. And when it's really crazy, because once you start looking at the world like it's full of opportunities, you see the opportunities. But basically, what you're doing in that scarcity mindset is just keeping yourself in this tiny little box, right? You're closing off all of the opportunities because you're saying, we're not looking for those. It's like keeping your head down and walking forward like that, as opposed to an abundance mindset. You're like lifting it up and going, I'm open. I'm open to all the opportunities. Like, let's see what I can find, kind of thing. And if you're looking for something, you're a lot more likely to find it, right? So it was just all about, I slowly started to do that. I slowly started to do things that put myself out of my comfort zone. So like I would have like really bad social anxiety around anybody that was kind of like out of my comfort zone economically. For example, this is so silly, but like I would have social anxiety trying to go to a Starbucks, because I was like, it felt uncomfortable for me. It was like kind of rich people went to Starbucks, right? And so I was like so uncomfortable. I didn't understand the menu, tall grande. What I was so like uncomfortable. But instead of like just staying in my comfort zone and refusing to go, I would make myself continue to go, have embarrassing moments where I didn't know what to order or whatever. And until I just kept, pushing myself to do that. Same thing with like going to a restaurant. I never went out to eat growing up. I didn't know how to like eat with like a fork and a knife, right? Because I'd only ever done like the sideways fork cutty thing. So
Yeah.
like I was like, and I had really bad social anxiety going to restaurants and silly little things like that you don't really think about, but I would just force myself to do them and just put myself in the situation over and over and over again through the anxiety and like the social awkwardness, until I got comfortable. And so it's like now I would never go to like an Applebee's or Ruby Tuesdays. Probably it's just like not my jam anymore, but that used to be fancy for me. Like that that used to be like bougie, and I was scared of it. So it's really about like that. It's about like you're the only one that can do it for you, right? But you have to go, hey, I'm going to hold myself accountable and keep pushing myself and putting myself in these situations that make me uncomfortable to grow. It's the same thing with like working out. Like you have to be uncomfortable to gain muscle, right? Like or lose fat or whatever you're trying to do. Like you have to be uncomfortable to do it, but then you get the growth out of it. So yeah, it's like that.
Amazing. Yeah, you should be very proud. You've done incredible. Yeah, well
Well,
done.
thank you. Yeah, but it's a lot of just being okay with embarrassing yourself, honestly. Same thing with like growing online. That's the big one when like people ask like, how do I figure out what I do, like what I want to do if I want to work for myself or own my own business or anything like that. And I've owned a few different businesses, like online e-commerce businesses. I used to have a online wholesale clothing company, like things like that. And it's like, well, you honestly just have to do things and just be okay with looking really cringe at the beginning, because the fact is you're gonna look cringe at the beginning, right? So like I do Instagram modeling. The first photos I took were, if I look back, I'm like, oh my God, they're
Yeah.
horrible. I'm like deer in the headlights, the lighting's horrible. It's just like it's awful. But the only reason why I got to the level that I'm at now is because I allowed myself to just put it up and be like, this is the best I could do right now. Like it's all I got. And now I'm sure I'll look back 5 years from now and be like totally cringe at what I'm doing now too, right? So you just have to be okay with that. I call it throwing noodles at the wall, like when you cook spaghetti, and you throw noodles at the wall and you just see what sticks. That's all you can do.
Definitely. And yeah, I think it's trial and error. You learn,
Mhm.
you grow. You gotta just be you just gotta get used to it, and you get better and better and more confident and stronger. And yeah, there's just so much. It definitely goes to the abundance mindset. Like the more you do things, the better and better life just becomes. Even though at times it can be uncomfortable, you just keep pushing through.
Yeah, be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Exactly. What are your ambitions for the future?
Yeah, so I definitely want to keep growing my podcast. Like that's been so fun getting to meet different people and talk to different people from like all kinds of backgrounds has been awesome and amazing. I've really enjoyed that. So that's a big one for me. Like that's kind of my main focus right now. And then I'm also working on a book, so that would be super cool. Public speaking, I want to work on that when like we're talking about trying to level up and get better. That's one that I'm super uncomfortable with right now. Um, so I just did a like an event and it was my first kind of like legit public speaking thing. I was so nervous. I totally bombed. I was just up there like it was horrible. But so now I know it's like, oh great, okay, now I got to like go put myself in a bunch of public speaking situations to get over that. So like I'm not nervous, you know what I mean? So that's that one I'm like looking forward to, but not, you know what I mean? It's like one of those things where it's like, great, I got a bunch of work ahead of me on that. But that's a big ambition for sure.
Cool. I look forward to seeing you in the future killing it in public speaking because
Oh
obviously
man,
again
yeah,
you're going to be.
just hopefully not pouring sweat or stuttering at that point, but yeah.
And what's the book going to be based about?
Yeah, so that's going to be about like having an abundance mindset based in individualism and like kind of rejecting the popular collectivism that's happening right now.
Okay, cool. Um, and for somebody in a similar situation or position as yourself previously, as you mentioned, starting off in things that look cringe, um, what advice would you give them?
If they want to start doing stuff online and they're about
Yeah, yeah,
being
yeah.
cringe.
Well, not just that, but I guess coming from a poorer background or not having, I guess, the infrastructure to grow. You know what I mean? Like, or coming from a different environment where obviously other people have a more far advanced, sorry, environment or background. Obviously you're doing incredible, and I guess to a certain degree defying the odds. What advice would you give someone that you're inspiring to take your route? Because you never know obviously who's listening and who's watching. You're inspiring other people to push through, right, and do
Yeah, so I don't know if you want to take my route, but like
it.
a big part of it is so I, like one thing that kind of sucks when you come from an impoverished community, when you start trying, like the people around you are going to do that whole, what's it called? Like the crabs in the pot thing, you know, where you start to try to climb up and they're going to pull you down. And a lot of times it's not even like intentional, you know, but it'll be like close friends, family. Like this is a pretty common occurrence thing. Like once you start trying to do a little better or whatever, it almost kind of attacks their ego. You know what I mean? It's like, well, I live this life. What are you trying to say? Like you're better than this? You know, it's like that. And so unfortunately, you're going to have to deal with a lot of that, but knowing that it's coming or knowing that it happens to a lot of people, I feel like helps out a lot. And you almost have to embrace kind of the solo journey. You have to embrace like I said, with even like being cringe online, right? You're gonna post stuff and you're gonna get attacked. Like it doesn't matter what you do. I saw a video the other day on TikTok that was literally just a fridge restocking video. It was like this chick just doing like an aesthetically pleasing fridge restock because she had all these like drawers and organizers or whatever. She was like full blown beautiful fridge lady, and so she's like restocking the fridge and it had gone viral and I opened the comments and it's just a bunch of negative comments on this like fridge. Like you would think like how can a fridge restock trigger anybody, right? But people were all in there about how much plastic she had or like the kind of food she was putting in her fridge or must be nice to be rich or blah 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 blah, like just assuming all of these things about her just off a fridge restock. And so, like, when you see stuff like that, you have to know it doesn't matter what you're going to do. Like, no matter what your niche, you're going to have people that just like want to crap on you for some reason because that's just what they do. You know, they're upset with their life and they kind of want to share the misery. So you have to also embrace the solo journey there and not let that get to you, right? So don't let people online get to you. You just have to kind of stand strong and be like, no, I'm trying, I'm going to like climb the mountain or whatever. And it's okay if some people throw tomatoes. I'm just going to keep going. And then once you hit a certain level, it's really funny because it kind of flips. all of a sudden, like the people that were making fun of you for wanting to start your own business are asking you for advice and stuff. Like your family's coming back around. People are like, will start asking you for money, all those wonderful things. So it's not about what you're doing. It's just the fact that you're trying that kind of is going to tick people off. And you have to know that ahead of time and be okay with it and kind of like get your little armor on and be ready, but just stay true to yourself the whole time and you'll be golden.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and I couldn't agree more. You've got to embrace it. You know what I mean? It's the road less traveled a lot of the time, so it's going to be solo, and it's going to be hard and challenges along the way.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But it's a little bit of the fun of it too, and you grow to have so much more self-confidence and like just pride in yourself, you know? It's the same thing like I guess bringing it back to the working out thing, once you start to see the actual like results and the benefits and everything, you're like, "Oh yeah, I built that. Like I did that. That's pretty freaking cool. Like I built that from nothing and I did it by myself and that's pretty freaking cool." And you start to just get just a lot more, yeah, just you're proud of yourself and you're happy with just yourself, and that's a really, really cool feeling. And I feel like you treat better or, like, treat other people better when you have that mindset, right? Like, all of a sudden, you're happy with yourself, and so you're spreading happiness instead of, trying to tear other people down like the kinda sad people that we mentioned before. So, there's so many benefits to it. It's really, really cool. It's a fun journey, and it's one that kinda never ends either, right? So it's like, yeah, I've come a long way, but I still have a long way to go. So,
Never stops. Um,
mhm.
so you're obviously very self-independent. Obviously you've touched on it that you've done a lot of the work. So have you had any mentors? Have you had any of your peers, or have you had anyone actually, I guess, help you and support you?
So I'm trying to think, like not really like in-person mentors, but like I said, I kind of got that from like I started reading books and then I went online and was like listening to personal develop. I'm like addicted to personal development now, right? So like anything I can consume that's gonna help me learn and grow and just be better. That's what I'm like obsessed with consuming now. So there's just a ton of people like online and stuff that I've met or even just that I've consumed their content that have helped me exponentially. But I actually haven't, yeah, like I haven't had a ton of people in real life. And you have to be kind of okay with that, right? I'm sure I could like seek someone out, but I haven't come across anybody in real life.
Well, that's even more kudos to you. It's amazing. Like that's the hardest part, I guess. Not having a mentor is you have to do it yourself. Where other people might even be exposed or have that around them. So yeah, that's incredible. Um, what motivates you daily?
Um, Yeah, I think just trying to advance. Like I always every single day I want to be better, right? Because I feel like if you start, I don't know, I'm like a shark, like if you stop swimming, you die kind of thing. Like if you aren't growing, I feel like you're dying. So I don't ever want to be stagnant. And I just have this kind of, yeah, just growth mindset. I've gotten really, really into the growth mindset and just wanting to grow every single day on any level, right? So be a little bit healthier or uh, be like a little bit more mindful, work on meditation a little bit more, or grow my business a little bit more, or whatever I can do that day to just be a little bit better. And once you start doing that and you get consistent at it, it really becomes like a whole lifestyle thing where you're just like, it's almost like a game, right? It's like, ooh, how can I be better today?
Yeah, awesome. And when you just said the negative comments, does if somebody says anything negative to you or comments to you negative, um, does that affect you at all still?
No, not now. That was a thing that I definitely went through though at the beginning. So especially when you're talking politics, right? So when I first started, I fell into the whole trap of thinking people were genuine. So I thought that like everybody that was commenting, like if they like genuinely didn't understand what I was saying, or they genuinely were asking a question, but then it took me a little while of realizing like, oh, they're not being genuine. Like you can't like there's no like back and forth that you can have. They just want to fight you or put you down or whatever. And they're not like out to have a genuine conversation with you. But yeah, that took me a little a little bit to learn. So I had a couple back and forths where I'd be like, no, that's not what I said at all. I don't understand, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm trying to be like super like, like explaining it to them. And I'm like, no, if I'm just like logical enough, they'll get it. Right. Wrong. Like, don't have that mentality. But so they get to you though, especially at the beginning, because I feel like you're not really used to people treating you like that at that level, right? Because there's always some sort of like consequence if you're just yelling this stuff at people in real life. So we don't do it as humans to the extent that you come across it on, say, Twitter, right? Like the it's a level of insanity. And especially when you hit into like the mob mentality stuff. So if you like trigger a group and then they swarm your social media pages and their whole intent is just to bring you down, their whole intent is to like report all your videos and downvote everything and just ruin you as much as they can. They want you just like wiped off the face of the internet, right? So like you're not used to that kind of level of insanity that you'll get online. And so at the beginning, it's very, very normal to like have that bother you. Another thing too is like I have a tendency to beat myself up for getting upset, right? Or getting triggered by something or letting something bother me. And that's something I've had to kind of work through as well, as being like, okay, I'm a human and I have human emotions, and it's okay that like when 100 people are yelling like shit at me that is like they're just trying to like attack me at every possible angle. They're like, what's gonna make her the most upset if we call her this or that or blah blah blah, it's like it's okay to have a reaction and be like, man, this is a little rough, like, oh, this is kind of a bummer. It's okay to feel like that. But like don't let the looters win, right? Like don't let the destroyers win. It kind of reminds me of like kids on the beach building sandcastles, and then another kid just comes up and stomps on it and crushes it, and it's like, for what? Like why? And it's like, don't let those people win, because that's not what life's about, right? So I don't know, it takes time. It takes a little bit, like at first like one or two negative comments is going to eat you up, and then eventually it's like you could have a whole barrage of them and you're like, oh hey, they're mad at me today. Interesting. I even have a couple of like people who, more than a couple, I have a handful of people who follow me just to like hate comment on every post. And when I don't see it now, I'm like, how's Brian doing? I wonder where Brian is. He hasn't hate commented in a few videos. I hope he's okay. So you definitely, it's just like exposure therapy and you'll get used to it.
Yeah, you've definitely built thick skin, that's for sure. So yeah.
Yeah, you have to, for sure. Yeah.
What are your hobbies and passions aside from, I guess, you keep busy? What do you like to do in your downtime, or to relax, or yeah, what are your passions or hobbies?
Yeah, so I love spending time outside. So anything I can do to like get outside, especially with like doing this like podcasting and making social media content and being inside a lot for a lot of work. I love to get outside hiking, running. If you couldn't have guessed, I work out a lot. Like this personal development has taken over a lot of my hobbies, like reading and audiobooks and other people's podcasts I love to consume. Stuff like that. Yeah.
Cool. And if you were 18 again and you could change anything, this could be personally or professionally, what would you change?
I hate to be that like no regrets person. I have the ink to prove it, but I really like, I think I look at everything like a lesson, and it's like if I wouldn't have gone through everything, I wouldn't be here, and maybe I would be somewhere better. But like I don't know, I've learned a lot and I've grown a lot, and I think that's wicked awesome. And so I don't think I would change anything. I had to go through a lot of it to learn the lessons.
Yeah, cool. Elizabeth, thanks for coming on the podcast. I do appreciate it. I really enjoyed interviewing. I think you've done amazing. You're very strong and independent, and yeah, I really look forward to your future and your trajectory you're on.
Thank you. I mean, this has been one heck of an ego stroke, so I appreciate it.
That'll do you for a while.
Yeah.
Cool.